I'm Marin Cole, and this is America, the land where ambition sleeps lightly and wakes up early. I learned to count money before I learned to braid my hair. That's not a metaphor. My father, Bernard Cole, ran numbers through breakfast, through dinner, through life itself. He'd slide invoices across the table like flashcards, make me add and subtract, round up or down, and ask what the margins meant. By the time I was 12, I could read a balance sheet faster than a poem. That was the rhythm of my childhood inside the wide gray house on Alder Lane in Portland, Maine. A house that smelled of salt, dust, and ambition. The porch on Alder Lane creaked like an old song. My father said it was a reminder that everything that carries weight will speak. The floorboards had memory. They whispered every step. My mother used to fill the house with violin music before she left, when I was 16. After that, the house fell quiet except for my father's voice and the faint clatter of the typewriter in his study. My brother, Victor, filled the silence with laughter at first, loud, careless, charming laughter that everyone forgave. Then the laughter thinned, replaced by the soft clink of wine bottles and the sound of him sleeping past noon. Our father loved two things, balance sheets and Victor. He'd look at my brother with that rare softness he saved for things he believed he could fix. I used to think it was love. Now I think it was hope. Hope can look like love when you squint. I didn't have that kind of hope. I had a different one. I believed in the precision of systems, the beauty of data. I loved the hum of servers, the steady click of code coming alive. To me, logic was comfort. It didn't drink or lie or walk out. Logic stayed. When I finished college at 23, I went straight into my father's company, Cole Freight Data, a logistics and analytics firm that managed supply lines for shipping companies across America. He'd started it with paper manifests and steel containers, but I saw what he couldn't yet imagine. Freight didn't just move. It spoke. Patterns were hidden in routes, delays, fuel consumption, even weather shifts. I wanted to listen. That's how Northlight was born, an AI system designed to predict shipping routes, anticipate port delays, and optimize cargo loads across the country. I built it with a small team. Elise Hart, who could charm a contract into existence, Nora James, our sharp legal counsel, and Graham Pierce, who handled finance like a mathematician with rhythm. The system learned fast. It watched the markets, the storms, and the trucks rolling through Ohio, Georgia, Nevada, and beyond. Within months, it began to outthink our human planners. The results were undeniable. In 2 years, Northlight took us from a small coastal firm to a national powerhouse worth $590 million. The board called it a miracle. My father called it a lucky algorithm. But luck had nothing to do with it. I had written every line of its core logic myself alone, in the quiet hours after midnight, fueled by cold coffee and the hum of determination. By the time I was 28, investors from Cleveland were requesting interviews. Business magazines wanted to feature the Cole family legacy, and a reserved fund out of London offered £12 million for a share in our expansion project. I remember my father shaking hands in photo ops, smiling like he'd cracked the code himself. I didn't mind. I was used to being the quiet one in the background, the ghost in the machine. Victor didn't work at the company. He said he was finding himself, though he usually found himself in restaurants, wine bars, or at poker tables in Savannah. He had my father's eyes, his charm, and his gift for easy excuses. He'd show up at the office sometimes, spinning stories about vision and brand presence, and people listened because his last name was Cole. He was good at sounding like the future without ever having to build it. I, on the other hand, didn't talk much. I built. I tested. I failed and rebuilt. I carried the company on code and caffeine. When our systems hit 98% accuracy in predictive routing, even my father had to admit it. Northlight was genius-level work. But genius isn't always rewarded the way you'd think. Not in families like ours. Not in America's old guard of inheritance and power. I still remember the night before my promotion was supposed to happen. The air smelled of rain and paper ink. I stayed late in the Portland office, finalizing contracts for our next expansion, an AI suite for autonomous port scheduling. Nora texted me from home. telling me to get some rest. Elise left a sticky note on my desk that said, "Tomorrow's your day, boss." I smiled and thought maybe, for once, it really would be. When I drove back to the house on Alder Lane, the porch light was still on. Inside, I found my father and Victor sitting by the fire. There was an open bottle of red wine on the table. Victor grinned when he saw me. "Dad says tomorrow's a big day," he said, swirling his glass. "Big for the company," I replied. "Big for the family," my father corrected. His tone was careful, measured in that way that made me uneasy. I sat across from them, the firelight flickering between us. "You've built something extraordinary," he said finally, his eyes on me. "You've proven that technology can transform the industry." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. He nodded once. "And now it's time for someone with vision to take it further." I didn't yet know what he meant. I just smiled faintly, said goodnight, and climbed the stairs to my room. The old floorboards sang under my steps. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the word vision, how it sounded so clean and yet could hide so much. From my window, I could see the harbor lights blinking in the distance, ships moving through the dark like quiet thoughts. That view used to make me feel powerful. That night, it made me uneasy. The next morning, I put on a blue blazer, tied my hair back, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who had worked herself into exhaustion for a dream she didn't fully own. Still, I went in with hope. Hope, that old currency. As I locked the front door, the porch creaked beneath me. I glanced back once at the house, its windows still, its paint fading at the edges. It had been the beginning of everything for me. Ambition, silence, resilience. I didn't know then that it would also be the place I'd return to years later when everything fell apart. But that morning, walking down Alder Lane toward the car that waited to take me to the office, I felt only the wind, sharp and new. The city skyline glimmered faintly in the distance. I told myself that this was it, the day I would finally step out of my father's shadow. I had no idea that by the time the sun set, the same man who taught me how to count dollars would decide I wasn't worth a single one. The morning of my promotion smelled like coffee and anticipation. The air in Coal Freight Data's headquarters always carried a faint trace of printer ink and glass cleaner, but that morning it seemed sweeter, lighter. I'd arrived before sunrise, parking in my usual spot by the back entrance, so I could walk through the quiet corridors before the world woke up. My sneakers whispered against the polished concrete floor, echoing softly through the empty lobby. This was my favorite part of every day, the stillness before the noise. I wore my blue blazer, the one that had seen more boardrooms than dates, and I tied my hair back in a low knot because I liked to look composed even when I wasn't. I wasn't nervous, exactly. I'd earned this moment. For 2 years, I had built and rebuilt Northlight until it was smarter, faster, more reliable than anyone could have imagined. I'd spent nights curled on the office couch debugging algorithms while other people dreamed of vacations. This was supposed to be the day it all became official, the day my father finally handed me the title that matched the work. When I reached my office, Nora James, our legal counsel, was already waiting by the glass wall. She held a slim folder pressed to her chest like it was sacred. "Morning, Marin," she said, smiling. "Everything's signed and sealed. You just need to breathe." I took the folder from her and flipped through the contracts, supplier renewals, licensing agreements, the master service contract for Northlight's AI platform. Each bore my name, inventor and product owner. It was my fingerprint on every line. Nora had been meticulous, binding every clause so that my authorship and control were clear. "You're sure everything's in order?" I asked. She nodded. "Everything is airtight. It's your system, Marin. Legally and otherwise." A knock on the glass interrupted us. Elise Hart, our head of sales, appeared holding 2 cups of coffee. She had that spark in her eyes, the one that meant she was holding back excitement. "You ready to own the world?" she teased, sliding a cup toward me. "They're setting up the conference room now. The view's incredible this morning. The harbor's like glass." Behind her, Graham Pierce from finance passed by, flashing me a grin and a fist bump. "You did it, Cole," he said. "Promotion day. The world's finally catching up." I smiled, grateful. They had become my family in ways my real one no longer could. We'd built this together through spreadsheets, sleepless nights, and whispered plans. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything would go right. By 10 o'clock, the building buzzed. Executives moved through the halls with an unusual spring in their step. Even the interns were whispering. My father had called for an all-hands meeting, the kind reserved for mergers, IPOs, or big announcements. I walked toward the glass-walled boardroom overlooking Portland Harbor, heart steady, heels clicking now that I'd changed into something more formal. Inside, the board members sat in a clean row. The sunlight hit their faces in a golden line, and the harbor beyond the windows glittered like coins tossed in water. At the center stood my father, Bernard Cole, in his gray suit and crimson tie. Beside him, leaning casually against the table, was Victor. I froze for a fraction of a second. He was supposed to be in Savannah, dealing with what he called strategic partnerships, which usually meant golf and champagne. Instead, he was here, hair slicked back, smile polished. My father motioned for silence. "Thank you all for coming," he began. His voice carried the same authority it always had, smooth, heavy with expectation. "This company has achieved remarkable growth, thanks in large part to innovation, perseverance, and faith in the future." He paused, and for an instant his gaze met mine. "My daughter, Marin, has led that innovation. Her vision gave us Northlight. Her drive carried us to new heights. And I want to acknowledge that today." A polite wave of applause spread through the room. My pulse quickened. This was it. The recognition. But my father continued, and that word, but, cut through the applause like a blade. "Every company must also evolve. We've built the foundation. Now we need someone who understands people, not just systems. Someone who can connect the heart of the company with the market it serves." He turned toward Victor. "Starting today, Victor Cole will serve as the new Chief Executive Officer of Cole Freight Data." The room shifted. The air went thin. My name was still ringing in my ears, and now it felt foreign, irrelevant. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You've done incredible work, Marin," he said, softer now, as if that made it better. "But your strengths are technical. We need leadership that speaks the language of people, not numbers." People. I managed, the word dry in my mouth. "You mean you're replacing me with him?" Victor chuckled, holding up his hands like it was a misunderstanding. "Hey, I didn't ask for this, Mayor. Dad just thinks I can steer the next phase. We're family, don't make this weird." Laughter from a few board members filled the cracks of silence. My father's expression didn't change. "Thank you, Marin, but you're not needed anymore. You can go." There was clean final for a long second, no one moved. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint creak of someone shifting in their chair. On the table in front of me lay the badge they'd made for the announcement, golden, engraved with my name. Marin Cole, CEO. It looked like a tiny, flattened sun. I left it there. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the boardroom. The air outside was colder, sharper. My reflection followed me down the hallway. Blazer crisp, expression unreadable. People glanced up from their desks as I passed. Some smiled uncertainly, thinking I was walking to a meeting. Others looked away, already guessing the truth. When I reached the elevator, I pressed the button and waited. The stainless steel doors mirrored my face back at me. Tired eyes, set jaw. Inside, I watched the floors tick down one by one. My hands didn't shake. I don't shake when someone changes the rules. I rewrite them. Outside, the harbor wind hit me full in the chest. I stood there for a moment, watching the water ripple under the sunlight. I thought about the hours I'd poured into this company, the birthdays missed, the nights coding until dawn. I thought about how easily everything I built had been handed to someone who'd never earned it. Then I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just a small, disbelieving laugh. Because for the first time in years, I had nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing left to lose, you finally remember what power feels like. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed with messages. Elise, Nora, Graham, all asking what happened. I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed silence first. I needed to think. By the time I started the engine, the city's skyline shimmered behind me. I gripped the steering wheel, the sun flashing off the glass buildings like fire. In that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. They may have taken the title, but they hadn't taken the truth. The real product, the heart of everything, was mine. And they would learn that soon enough. The morning after everything fell apart, the world felt unnaturally still. I woke up in a small rental house on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, surrounded by a silence so heavy it almost hummed. The house wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, old wood floors, and a kitchen window that framed a slice of the Rocky Mountains, but it was mine. After years of working in glass towers and polished offices, it felt good to be somewhere ordinary, somewhere without my family name etched on the door. I brewed a cup of coffee that tasted faintly metallic and made toast I didn't eat. The air smelled like rain and dust. The world was going on, unaware that everything I'd built was about to change. When the coffee cooled in my hands, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. On the screen, the company name, Cole Freight Data, looked like a stranger's. The new press release had already gone out. Victor Cole appointed CEO, visionary leadership expected to take company global. I scrolled through the words slowly, line by line, until my jaw ached from clenching. The photographs showed Victor in a tailored navy suit, smiling, hand extended, as if he'd built the world with those fingers. My name appeared once, buried in a sentence thanking me for technical contributions. I closed the tab. Then I opened the folder labeled Northlight, Master. Inside were the original files, algorithms, deployment notes, contracts. Every piece of Northlight's foundation, my foundation. I clicked through the legal documents Nora had prepared months earlier, double-checking the clauses we'd added in small, deliberate strokes. The intellectual property rights, the license terms, the dependency clauses, they were all still there, all tied directly to me. The company's right to use Northlight was contingent on one simple condition: my continued role as its architect and director. Without me, they had no license, no right to deploy, sell, or modify the system. My father, in his haste to push me out, had severed the one thread holding the structure together. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. The truth was almost poetic. When you remove the beam, the roof remembers gravity. I spent the next few hours drafting 3 letters, calm, precise, and surgical. The first went to the board of directors, informing them of the immediate termination of Cole Freight Data's software license. The second went to Nora, requesting formal legal documentation to support the action. And the third went to our largest clients in Austin, Chicago, and Seattle, notifying them that the software they were using was no longer authorized for commercial operation. The words came easily. I'd written enough contracts to know the language of finality. Effective immediately, the license for the Northlight predictive freight system is withdrawn due to breach of agreement. All use, distribution, and modification must cease. Future negotiations may be initiated upon new terms. Simple, professional, devastating. I hesitated only once, when writing the email to the London fund that had invested £12 million in our expansion. They had been polite, enthusiastic, almost old-fashioned in their courtesy. I didn't like disappointing them, but business was business, and I returned the funds with a short note. Contract dissolved. We'll revisit when ownership aligns. It took less than 5 minutes to send all the emails. I watched them vanish from my outbox, tiny paper planes flying into the storm. At 9:41 a.m., my phone buzzed with a first alert, a small dip in the company's stock. A market correction, the analysts would call it. At 9:47, another alert followed, a sharp drop. By 10:12 a.m., the notifications came so fast the screen blurred. Shares had fallen 98% before lunch. The ticker line on the finance feed looked like a cliff. My old colleague, Peter Lang, who traded for a hedge firm in New York, texted me, "Is this you?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down and went to wash the uneaten toast from my plate. Outside, rain began to fall in soft diagonal lines, streaking the glass. The scent of wet earth seeped in through the cracked window. It was the kind of rain that made you believe the world was being quietly rinsed clean. When the phone buzzed again, it wasn't Peter. It was Elise. Her message was short. "You pulled the plug, didn't you?" I hesitated before replying. Then I wrote. It was already unplugged. I just turned off the lights. She didn't answer, but a few minutes later, she sent a thumbs-up emoji. By noon, every business network in America was running the same headline. Coal freight data collapses after licensing crisis. CEO Victor Coal faces legal review. A technical glitch or internal sabotage. I didn't bother reading beyond the headlines. They'd call it sabotage, of course. No one likes to admit that arrogance can break a company faster than any hacker. Around 2, Nora called. Her voice was calm as always. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "You're within your rights. The license was conditional, and they breached it. There's nothing they can do." "I know," I said softly. "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "Define okay." She sighed. "They'll come after you. Bernard, Victor, maybe even the board. You should prepare yourself." "I already have." We hung up, and I sat in the quiet for a long while. The house creaked as the temperature dropped, old wood shifting like a tired body. I thought about Alder Lane, the gray house, the creaking porch, the way my father's study smelled like paper and old bourbon. I wondered if he was sitting there now, staring at a collapsing empire he didn't understand. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't revenge either. It was release. Like I'd been holding my breath for years without knowing it, and finally let go. That evening, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The sky was a pale lavender, heavy with clouds. Children rode bicycles past, shouting and laughing. A dog barked behind a fence. Everything was normal, beautifully, stubbornly normal. I hadn't lived among ordinary things in years, and it grounded me more than any victory ever had. When I got back home, I opened my laptop again. My inbox was overflowing. Journalists, lawyers, even old acquaintances from university asking for a statement. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a blank document and typed a name at the top. Harbor Plane Technologies. That was the seed of the next beginning. Not a revenge project, not a rebound, but something cleaner, something built with honesty and care. I would take everything I'd learned and make it human this time. As I typed, I thought about my father's voice, sharp and certain, saying I wasn't needed anymore. Maybe he was right. Not in his world. But in mine, I was essential. At 11:38 p.m., the rain stopped. The air smelled new. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, not triumphant, not bitter, just steady. The storm had passed, and I had survived it. Some roofs need to fall before you remember how to build. I returned to Maine in early spring, months after the collapse. The air was sharp with salt and pine, and the Atlantic wind carried the kind of silence that felt like forgiveness. The gray house on Alder Lane stood just as it always had, its porch sagging slightly, its shutters faded to the color of smoke. The roofline was uneven now, as though time itself had bent its spine. I stood at the gate and stared for a long while. I didn't knock. I didn't need to go inside to know that every creak of that porch still belonged to me. It was where I had learned numbers, mistakes, and pride, the trinity of my father's lessons. The news had called it the sudden winter. Every network in America had spent a week dissecting what I'd done, what they called a corporate implosion, a cautionary tale. Pundits filled their screens with phrases like power gone rogue and one woman's vendetta against legacy. They missed the point. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. I hadn't destroyed anything that wasn't already rotten. My father tried to call. His messages began formal. "Marin, we need to talk," and softened with each attempt until they became single words. "Please. Home." I didn't answer. He'd spent a lifetime speaking over me. Silence was the only language left between us that I could own. Victor called, too. I let the phone ring. His voice in my mind was enough. Lazy charm. Practiced regret. I knew he'd lost everything. The house in Savannah, the board seat, the empty title. For him, loss was new. For me, it was old company. A week after the collapse, I met Elise at a diner just off the highway outside Boston. The neon sign flickered above us, half-lit and stubborn. She slid into the booth across from me with 2 coffees and the same sharp confidence that had gotten us through the early days of Northlight. "We start over," she said simply.
Clean.
"New name, new structure. You own the product, I run the clients. No family, no noise." I studied her for a moment, the determination in her posture, the glint of hunger in her eyes. She wasn't just loyal, she was ready to build again. "We build a better house," I said finally. "Not on Alder Lane, on open ground." We filed the paperwork within a week. I named the new company Harborplane Technologies, a nod to the steadiness I craved. We raised $5 million in seed funding. A family office in Boston contributed $2.5 million in dollars. A quiet European investor sent £1 million along with a handwritten note. For the work, not the noise. The rest came from small, deliberate backers, people who believed in product over pedigree. We hired slowly, carefully. No big names, no inflated titles. Riley, June, Owen, Marco, and Tess. Ordinary people with extraordinary patience. We built rules that were simple. No hidden code, no silent changes, and no heroes. Every document was clear, every meeting short, every voice heard. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And honesty after everything felt radical. By summer, Harborplane had its first client, a logistics firm out of Seattle that had quietly left coal freight data in the wreckage. When I saw their name on the signed contract, I sat very still, just breathing. We were back, not loud, not fast, but real. On a Sunday morning, I stood in my small Denver kitchen again, sunlight stretching across the counter. The window was open, and the world outside smelled like coffee and possibility. My laptop chimed with a new email from a client. The subject line read, "Why we chose you." The message was simple. "We picked you because you tell the truth." I read it 3 times. Then I laughed, a quiet, raw laugh that tasted like release. My father once told me that the market is a house made of wind. At the time, I believed him. But standing there, coffee in hand, I realized he was only half right. The market may be wind, but a company, a real company, is built from people who believe in what they make. It's a house held together by trust, not inheritance. The gray house on Alder Lane had been my beginning, but it no longer defined me. My new house had no locked doors, no ghosts in the walls. It lived in code, in conversations with kind eyes, in contracts written with care. It was fragile and strong at once, like all things worth keeping. I am Marin Cole. I built an empire, lost it, and learned that survival isn't about holding on, it's about letting go and building again with cleaner hands. This is America, and I am still here,